Evening, India. This is Times Now. Let's talk about the Wagner Group and Wagner chief, what he has done to President Putin. Russia accused the head of the powerful mercenary group Wagner of mounting an armed uprising and ordered his arrest. Charges of mutiny were also slapped against Prigozhin for threatening the defense minister. After the action by Kremlin, the situation is tense in Russia as Prigozhin has vowed to topple the military government and urged the Russians to join his forces against the military regime. He has also announced his force of 25,000 strong that was moving forward towards Moscow and said that they would destroy anything that would come their way. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry, in a statement addressed to the Wagner Group mercenary fighters, has said that they must join the mainstream, give up arms amid the tension. The security of Russian cities has been tightened and soldiers and tanks have been positioned on the road.
I'm addressing all the citizens of Russia, the armed forces, the law enforcement agencies and special services, the fighters and commanders now in their battle positions, fighting against enemy attacks, doing this heroically. This night, I talked to commanders in all directions. I'm also addressing those who have been deceived into the path of a grave crime and armed rebellion. Today, Russia is fighting fiercely for its future, fighting against aggressions of neo-Nazis and their masters. Directed against us is all the military, information and economic power of the West. We're fighting for the life and security of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for our right to be and to remain in Russia, a country with 100-year-old history. It's a battle when the fate of our nation is being decided, and it requires us all to be united. Unity, consolidation and responsibility. When everything must be put aside that makes us weaker. Any differences that may be used and are used by our enemies to disrupt us from within. So the action that split our unity are basically an act of renegade actions against those fighting at the front. It's a stab in the back against our country and our nation. And this stab was dealt to Russia in 1917 while the country was fighting in World War I. But its victory was stolen from it. Intrigues, bickering behind the nation's back turned into a great catastrophe, to the destruction of army, and the collapse of a state, the loss of huge, vast territories, and the tragedy of the Civil War, when Russians went against Russians, and brother went against a brother.
We just crossed the administrative border between Donetsk People's Republic and Rostov region. The situation there is absolutely normal, just like it is every day. Right now we are in Rostov region. We're on the way to the city. As you can see, the road is quite clear from where we are at the moment. However, once we get closer to the city, we are about 60 to 70 kilometers away. Situation might change, but so far it is all clear.
Let's open this up then. Ben Harris, founder and editor-in-chief, BNE, former bureau chief for Daily Telegraph in Moscow. Dr. Swasti Rao, associate fellow at the Manohar Parikar IDSA, needs no introduction really. Ambassador Gurjeet Singh also on the panel. Good evening, all of you. Let's get a view from Moscow. Mr. Harris, what's going on? How should we be seeing this?
Well, it's a disaster for Putin. I mean, an armed insurrection by some of the most competent fighters within the Russian forces. The Wagner have been responsible for most of the offensive fighting that's been going on in the last 8 months, and actually scored a huge victory by recapturing Bakhmut from the Ukrainian forces. And suddenly they've turned on their master and walked into Russia and captured one of the major Russian towns. Rostov is the headquarters for Russia's southern military district. So not only is it a command center, but it also must be home to significant deposits of arms, ammunition. And now Putin's got this huge pain in the ass problem to deal with, like how to to retake control, how to crush this insurrection and do it quickly, because it threatens him with all sorts of political problems.
Ambassador Singh, now before we deep dive, on the face of it, what do you make of what's going on?
Well, I think the war is not going well for Russia. And as our colleague from Moscow said, that your best troops are now in mutiny. So something is seriously wrong in the strategic calculation. And the problem seems to be that the supply lines and the money routes are being denied to the Wagner Group, which basically runs, they are mercenaries. They run more than patriotism on funding. And if you see the statement by Prigozhin today, he says that all the loot that he got from Africa, particularly Central African Republic and the Sudan, he says that the army brass used it up and did not support the army. So he is supporting the soldier on the front line and trying to say that the leadership of the defense ministry and the army is incompetent and deliberately denying him the ammunition and support which he needs to continue the battle.
What is your assessment of this new threat to Putin, as many are describing it?
Well, a very good evening to all of you. And yes, this is something which is quite unprecedented. But again, like I have been saying again and again, it is not unexpected, because the cracks within the MOD, I mean, with respect to Wagner, between the Wagner and the MOD, have been around for a while now. We saw these first erupting around September, when Wagner chief started to to go public with all the criticism, etc. But I think I've been in and out of a lot of debates lately on this particular development in Russia. I think there has been a bit of a lack of understanding in where this all is coming from. And if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll try to throw some light on that, which is that you have to understand that what is happening right now is not just coming out of the blue. I think the most important takeaway is not that the Wagner and the MOD are not really getting along together. I think we've been making this point again and again. What is the most interesting thing is that if you look at what is happening between the MOD and the FSB, I mean, in all the debates that I have had on this particular issue, I think the role of the FSB, the Federal Security Service of Russia, has not been invoked, has not really been discussed. And what we have to understand is that the Wagner somewhere got this importance. Wagner is a kind of a hybrid group, and it was created somewhere by the FSB to actually compete with the MOD. I mean, this is how it works, and this is one of the reasons why Prigozhin became so powerful the way it did. And one of the reasons, if you look into the details of this internal fighting for a while now, has been that the FSB has been trying to replace the Ministry of Defense officials and the head of the General Staff, and here I mean Shoigu and Gerasimov, with their favored generals like Sorokin, etc. But nobody expected the Wagner to go to this extent. I mean, Prigozhin to go to this extent with actually attacking the headquarters in Rostov the way it has happened. And one of the reasons why, for example, they did not see any opposition coming in Rostov was because this fortress plan that they had kind of fell apart, okay? And nobody came and, tried to oppose them. So all this sort of indicates that something which is quite problematic for the Russians, especially for the MOD, for Putin, and I expect President Putin to finally come out and have some sort of a crackdown on the Wagner chief, because otherwise this is just going to go completely out of hand. And we also saw how Wagner chief come out and respond to President Putin's, video that he released today in the morning, where he said that Russia needs a new president. So this is obviously getting quite out of hand. And I would expect a better crackdown from the Russian military elite before it really turns against Putin himself.
Is that happening already as we speak, Mr. Harris? How are you? What is your take on what's happening as far as the Russian offensive against the Wagner is concerned?
We're still waiting to see, in so much as they crossed the border out of Ukraine into Russia proper about midnight last night. And by the early morning, they basically walked into Rostov. There were MVD, there were like Interior Ministry troops stationed and ordered to prevent them from entering, but Wagner turned up with tanks, armored personnel carriers, and the Interior Ministry troops just, they weren't prepared for that. And they basically stood by and watched as Wagner walked into Rostov and took control, apparently without firing a shot. And now there's been reports on the pro-Wagner channels of like columns moving north through Lipetsk and Voronezh, halfway up to Moscow. However, more recently, I saw the Interior Ministry updating and saying they've set up roadblocks on the roads north of Rostov, and that armored carriers are not traveling north. It seems that they're sitting in the city. And if you look at it on paper, I mean, 25,000 troops is a lot, but it's several hundred kilometers up to Moscow, and they're exposed there inside Russia. Of course, the Russians completely control the airspace. The Russian aviation, the Air Force is extremely powerful, and I don't see how you can get a column of 25,000 men up to Moscow and having them survive if the Russians unleash the planes on them. So as far as I can see at the moment, they're sat in the city. And as I said, in urban warfare, 25,000 is easily enough to defend the city of Rostov against a much larger force if it attacks. Urban warfare, the calculus, you need a lot of men. It's very difficult to retake. If they went out into the open onto the motorway, then they'd be exposed to air attacks. So Putin's now in a very difficult position deciding what to do. If he were to crush this and Prigozhin were to stay in Rostov, then he would end up having to bomb one of his own cities. The optics of that are awful. If Prigozhin was foolish enough, I think, to leave the city and try and make it to Moscow, then I think you'd see them very quickly destroyed by air power and regular troops in an open battle. Russia has more than enough men, 1 million strong in its army, to bring some troops from somewhere, the reservists that they're keeping back from the Ukraine fight, to be pressed into service to fight this. So I think why I thought initially there might be a very hard missile strike against Rostov,
right.
But as I say, I think the damage that will be done to the city is very unappealing.
And like you said,
so,
the optics would be actually embarrassing, if not, disturbing and awful. But Dr. Rao, before I come back to you on a point, Ambassador Singh, what do you think are the larger ramifications? And I'm asking you this because, at a time when the world leaders are already turning against Putin, for this to happen now.
What you call the world leaders have always been against Putin. The problem is that the elites within Russia, are they turning against Putin? As Dr. Rao has said, there have been anticipated rebellions against Putin for some time. Perhaps we thought some other oligarchs would lead them. But Prigozhin was an unexpected leader of a mutiny against him. So one aspect is you deal with it politically and you say, okay, this is an effort by some oligarchs to dislodge Putin. Or is it an effort to control the narrative of the Ukraine war, where Prigozhin and Wagner Group want priority over what the Ministry of Defense is doing? And I think Dr. Rao has very well explained their alliance with the FSB. Now, what role is the GSU playing in this? What role is Putin's 300,000 strong guard playing in this? The Chechens have already shown their hand. Now, ever since the Chechen rebellion was cut down 2 decades ago, this is the first time that Russia is actually facing a military rebellion. So there are different players coming up, each one jockeying. Now, is it for political power or is it for military power? That question, I think, is too early to decide. I saw the German foreign minister talking to the European G7 minister, and I think they also are not certain. So it seems that Prigozhin has stumped a lot of people today. And I think we need to watch what he does. For me, it will be extremely unfortunate if the Russians were to bomb the city that he has taken as if it was a Ukrainian city. That would be disastrous.
Disastrous, and that's the point that Ben Harris also underlined. Dr. Rao, finally, before we take a break, wouldn't it be right to say that this is a complete undermining of Putin's authority? He didn't see this coming.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like everybody else has also mentioned, the first thing is that regardless of the outcome of the said mutiny, I mean, regardless of that, whether they succeed in taking down Moscow, I have strong reservations. I would never argue that it's so easy to take down Moscow. But regardless of that outcome, there is little, I would say, doubt on the fact that this has really dented President Putin's, so to say, influence, President Putin's leadership in Russia on a global scale. Everybody is watching it. Today is an age of social media. Before anything reaches the newsrooms, it's already there on social media. So the point is that this is a major dent for President Putin. Number two key takeaway, in my opinion, is that, again, this is, whether you look at it directly or indirectly, but this is going to be in favor of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, because I've already said it once and I repeat that what you see in Ukraine is a communitization of war effort, and every single person out there seems to be very committed to defending their territory, while on the Russian side you see this major chaos unfolding. The soldiers don't know who they're fighting for. I think now the soldiers do not even know who they are loyal to. So this particular thing is going to be in the favor of the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian counteroffensive. That's number two. And number three is perhaps the kind of internal damage that we are still to sort of understand, because like everybody said, I think there's a reason why Prigozhin has taken the city of Rostov, because like everybody said, in urban warfare with 25,000 people, it is very, very difficult. You can't really launch massive airstrikes on your own city and the people that that are part of your country. So these kind of things make it extremely complex. Okay. And like I said, what surprises me at the end is that I think because I have analyzed it myself, a lot of people have been analyzing it too, I see no reason as to why President Putin would not try and call the shots earlier, would not try and control what was happening. I see a semblance of that coming out now, because I saw that I think the MOD has already issued some sort of an information, some sort of a decision that they would give amnesty to those Wagner fighters who now give up arms and try and join the larger Russian cause against Ukraine, etc. So I think that lack of dialogue, perhaps, or Wagner chiefs, Prigozhin's obstinacy, these kind of things have been allowed to get out of hand. And it's really difficult to actually tell you or analyze with confidence and with certainty as to what is driving what. But for sure, there is internal cracks, internal divisions, and those crevices are now widening for everybody in the world to see. So I would still keep my fingers crossed and take everything with a pinch of salt. But like I said, that this is definitely a big blow to President Putin and Russia's special military operation, because you now see that there is a special military operation launched by the Wagner against the Russian MOD.
The war in Ukraine has been raging for the last 16 months. Putin had set a timeline that was much different, much shorter. Mr. Harris, in that light, what is your assessment of the track down? How long do you think it would take Putin to crush this rebellion?
Well, he's in a very difficult position. I mean, as Dr. Rao was just saying, that the attack on Rostov, really, I think, thinking about it all day, as we have done, is off the agenda, because you kill civilians, you smash one of Russia's important cities, and then it doesn't leave you many options. So, like, if the Russian, the Interior Ministry is offering amnesty to the fighters, then you try and bleed it away, and you can lock them up in the city and ignore it. Although it's extremely embarrassing, you don't have to spend a lot of resources. You can just keep them there and try and winkle out the resistance by undermining Prigozhin's role, threatening them with very severe sentences if they were captured, offering them amnesty and to join the larger fight, appealing to their patriotism, and see if you can get some of those fighters to leave the city. Because in a way, it's an intractable problem for Putin that I don't see how he can easily end this by force. The one option would be to strike today before they get organized, before they're very well defended, and in the hope of actually killing Prigozhin himself. I mean, there's a precedent for this in Chechnya. They took out the General Dadayev by tracking a satellite phone and sending a missile to that phone, and that decapitated the Chechen resistance in the first war and actually brought an end to the war relatively quickly. And Prigozhin plays such an important role personally that if you were to take him out personally, then you could decapitate, and actually this insurrection would melt away, because it's not, it's his army. But as I say, the options on the table for Putin are not appealing, and we haven't seen an attack. We've seen them close down the roads. We haven't seen the Wagner leave the city. So this talk about going to Moscow, as far as I can see at this point, is largely talk. And so I think we're going to end up in a stalemate. And then the Russian propaganda machine will come in and they'll try and belittle them, undermine him as much as they can.
Thank you, Ben Harris, Dr. Swasti Rao, Gurjeet Singh, Ambassador Singh, for this wonderful exposition, really, so that you have really broken this down for our viewers to understand. Hope to catch up on this again, because it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. So thanks for your time. Viewers, we're taking a short break. More news breaks on the other side. Stay with Times Now.